have been in a room with Xi Jinping. So what was your experience of meeting him? Let's just say. So how do you basically portray him as a world leader?
No, Xi Jinping clearly is a very strong leader. He has come to dominate political space in China like no other leader since Mao Zedong. Uh, Xi Jinping thought has become part of uh,
China is
Chinese,
heading towards.
constitution
Yes, sir.
of party state, an essential element. They talk about leadership of Communist Party of China, which Xi Jinping had scored. So to some extent, it's become a personality cult also.
This is exactly what I want to say. Like, why the hell are we dealing with China? Why are we trading with China? So since 2020 Galwan class, our trade, let's just say, deficit has increased by 62%. I just don't get this thing.
You have to understand that.
Let's just say go back to your journey in Sri Lanka. So you are the ambassador over there. How were you treated as an ambassador? Let's say even as an ordinary Indian citizen, when you were in the streets of Sri Lanka, nobody knows that you are the ambassador, right? So is there still so much of hatred towards Indians from Sri Lankan?
No, far from it.
How do you portray S. Jaishankar as foreign minister of the country, sir?
No, he has been, and he's an old friend. So
I see.
let me start with full disclosure. He's my batchmate.
I see.
He was my predecessor in.
Hi guys, welcome to the Jay and Bharat show. Sir, thank you so much for being on the show, Ambassador Ashok Kantha, sir. It is an honor for me to have you on the show, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
So, sir, first things first, I really want to know from your opinion, what does diplomacy feel like? Like you have devoted your whole career for this field. So, sir, can you curtail the experiences of it? Like, can you describe the audience?
Put very simply, diplomacy is the art and craft of promoting your country's national interests, working with foreign governments, societies, international organizations. You do it in many ways. You project your point of view, you interpret your foreign partners to domestic audience back home.
Yes, sir.
And most importantly, you try and persuade and influence your interlocutors to go along with your interests. So that's the primary purpose. As a country, India, as you know, is a developing society. It's a country with a long civilizational heritage. It has a sense of destiny. We are moving in certain direction. Much of the work will be done back home in terms of economic development, maintaining societal cohesion, educating people, providing better health care. But many of these tasks can be facilitated by working with your foreign partners.
I see.
So that's what diplomacy is all about.
And so can you tell me how does it feel like to be a diplomat, or let's just say even an ambassador for the same?
Well, in my case, I had a fairly long diplomatic career.
Yes, sir. Kindly share the
spanning
journey.
38 years. I was an accidental diplomat in the sense that I didn't quite visualize becoming a diplomat when I was studying. In fact, we were participating in JP hesitation at that time. I was studying in Patna University. So I appeared in civil service examination without completing master's degree because we lost 2 years. And I happened to be selected. I didn't quite, I'd given foreign service my first preference. Didn't quite expect that,
Yes, sir.
I'll rank fairly high. I was selected foreign service without much preparation, without much background in, for foreign service. But it turned out to be an amazing journey for me. Even after 3 decades plus in foreign service, the excitement of representing your country,
yes, sir.
It always left me humbled. It was something truly, extraordinary, and a kind of experience you get I'll just give you, a couple of
Yes, sir.
examples to illustrate my journey. As a young diplomat, after learning Chinese in Singapore, I was sent to Beijing. Uh, I was there from 81 to 85. As you know, China at that time was coming out of a very tumultuous
Yes,
period
sir.
of cultural revolution. It was just opening up, reforming. Uh, my task was to report on what's happening in Chinese economy. So we are reporting, communes are likely
Yes,
to be
sir.
dismantled, big change, rural changes are taking place. Understanding those changes and reporting those changes back home was a huge educative experience. At the same time, I was involved with facilitating resumption of uh, cultural, scientific, academic contacts with China after a gap of nearly 2 decades.
I see.
Once again, two huge civilizations, two of the greatest civilizations of the world, uh, getting to know each other once again
Yes, sir.
after a hiatus of 2 decades, following
Yes, sir.
1962 conflict. It was quite amazing. Fast forward to my period as High Commissioner to Sri Lanka.
Yes.
I went there in 2009 and I was there until 2013. I went there soon after end of civil war, which lasted for nearly a
Nearly.
quarter
Yes,
century
sir.
in Sri Lanka. Uh, it was really brutal. Sri Lanka was a country uh, which had suffered hugely, and it was just trying to come out of that nightmare. As the closest neighbor of Sri Lanka, our task was to help with relief, reconstruction, rehabilitation, reconciliation.
Yes.
Uh, we were involved in a very big way. And as High Commissioner, my task was to see that how we provide the assistance in a timely and effective manner, but as per requirements and priorities of Sri Lankan government and society. So we got involved in some really big project, apart from doing a lot of
Yes, sir.
retail projects. For instance, 2010, we decided to construct 50,000 houses in Sri Lanka in northern eastern provinces, which are badly affected by civil war. Uh, we didn't know how to do that, frankly. We started with a pilot project where one of the PSUs came and started constructing
Yes, sir.
houses. It turned out to be fairly disastrous experience. So
I
we had
see.
to do a complete course correction. We shifted to a different model where most of the houses were developed by owner beneficiaries themselves. We provided them money, we provided them technical support, provided them material, hand-holding by implementing agencies selected by us, and that worked out beautifully. Uh, Likewise, we were told that India makes promises but doesn't deliver. So it became a challenge for me
Yes,
and
sir.
my team how to complete projects in a timely manner. And many of the projects like Northern Railway project, we started and we completed in a timely
I
manner.
see.
Uh, Small experiences, big experience, like one memory which never leaves me.
Yes, sir.
Uh, we were arranging, Jaipur Foot. You're aware of that. They have artificial limb
Yes, sir.
refitment program, very effective, done in different parts of the world apart from within India. We invited them to come to Sri Lanka because many people have lost their limbs. I recall one young girl, she had lost both her legs. She was fitted with artificial legs, and within a few minutes, she walked towards me and kind of big smile on her face.
Yes,
I'll
sir.
never forget. So these are
Definitely, sir.
experiences, memories of being able to help in some way. I returned to Sri Lanka 3 weeks ago. I went to Jaffna, Trincomalee, other places, and Colombo uh, after a long gap. Uh, So I could see many of the projects we had initiated, many of the trees we had planted are bearing fruit. So it gave one,
Yes.
big satisfaction apart from getting the feeling that we could contribute,
Yes, sir.
howsoever modestly,
Yes, sir.
to the national endeavor of assisting Sri Lanka. In some areas, we didn't succeed. Like we wanted to encourage the government of Sri Lanka to move towards political settlement to ethnic problem. That hasn't made much headway. But in some other areas, we made uh,
Yes, sir.
some good achievements, which gives one
Yes,
satisfaction.
yes, sir. You have really had a fruitful career, sir, to be honest.
Yes, no, I have for someone coming from small towns. I studied in very small places in Bihar. In fact, to begin with, just conversing in English was
Yes, sir.
as a it was a challenge for me. And I remember, when I went for my first interview for State Bank of India, where fortunately I was selected. Uh, I was really nervous that how will I manage to
Yes, sir.
conduct interview. So coming with that kind of background,
I see. Humble
given the honor
background.
of representing your country,
Yes, sir.
including in some of the uh, you know key assignments,
Yes, sir.
uh, is something I
Definitely,
look
sir.
back upon with a great pride.
Definitely. I have a personal story, sir. See, I was actually looking out for ambassadors for me to have on the show. So I had shortlisted, let's just say, 7 to 8 ambassadors. But you were the one I had first reached out to. Reason being, so this I'm being very honest. I had seen your DP on WhatsApp, and you were so humble, like so charming personality. And I like when I saw your photo, I was like, I want to have this sir on the show. I was instantly like, I really want this ambassador sir to be on the show because I really love him a lot. The way you were, you were just so simple in that photo. I was like, my God. Yes, sir.
Jaish, no, when you approached me,
Yes,
I
sir.
readily agreed. Uh, I saw your work,
Yes,
which
sir.
was very impressive, but also because I believe that foreign policy is not uh, about Delhi.
Yes, sir.
Uh, it's something which should reach out to people in different parts of the country. That's why when we have G20 Summit, which we're hosting next month,
Yes, sir.
Government of India has made an effort to see that meetings are organized all over the country. So that kind of outreach need to generate awareness uh, to see that people in states also feel that they are stakeholders in this process. That's very important.
Yes,
It
sir.
cannot be just an elite-driven
Yes, sir.
enterprise.
Sir, what are your expectations from the G20 summit?
Well, G20 Summit, we have done extensive preparation, as I mentioned.
Yes, sir.
We in a way has uh, broken a new path by taking it to different parts of the country, something which hadn't happened in case of earlier G20 presidencies. So already, I think it has made an impact, uh, both in terms of uh, how our role is perceived within country and how our interlocutors and partners perceive India, because they could
Yes,
get
sir.
to see different parts of the country. In terms of agenda and outcome, still we don't know what will come out uh, uh, from G20 summit next month. Uh, One major focus area for us has been being the voice of global south, developing
Yes, sir.
countries of Asia, Africa, Latin America, Oceania, because these countries are sometimes ignored in international discourse, and they're suffering at this point of time
Yes, sir.
because global economy is not doing so well. You have conflicts like Ukraine, which has in a way sucked oxygen out of the system.
Yes,
So
sir.
people are not paying enough attention to concerns, problems, and aspirations of global South. So it's not coincidental that one of the first things we did was to host a Global South Summit,
Yes, sir.
which was very well participated. And I believe that during deliberations of upcoming summit, we will forcefully raise issues like debt, developmental requirement, climate finance,
Yes, sir.
and various other preoccupations of global south. So this is one area. But there are a whole lot of areas I don't want to go into detail, but there are also constraints. And one major problem we are facing is that uh, G20 countries are badly divided at this point of time, especially on the issue of the Ukraine
Yes, sir.
conflict. Uh, uh, as you are aware, various ministerial meetings which have taken place, we could not agree on joint statements or communiques.
Yes.
So instead, we had to opt for what is called chair's statement. Uh, uh, we don't know whether a joint communique will emerge out
Yes,
of
sir.
G20 summit. But on the whole, I believe that it will be a productive summit. And the fact that G20 presidency is going from one developing country to another, from Indonesia to India to Brazil to South Africa,
Yes, sir.
four presidencies. This will also ensure continuity and focus on concerns and interests
Yes, sir.
of developing countries, which is very important for us.
So, during your time in China, so can you elaborate your experience over there as an ambassador, as a serviceman, and can you also critically explain or recite any incidents which happened over there in the country in your tenure, sir?
During my diplomatic career, uh, China has been a very major
Yes, sir.
component. Uh, as I mentioned earlier, I studied Chinese in Singapore at the National University of Singapore. I have done three assignments in China. As a young diplomat, I referred to
I
81,
see.
85. I was there. I was Consul General in Hong Kong, 2000, 2003. And then I was ambassador in China,
Yes.
2014, 16. I have done 8 years at headquarters, working as Joint Secretary East Asia and Director China. So China has been, for me, a very important part of my diplomatic experience. So when I reached Beijing as ambassador, uh, I went there with certain preparation, with certain background. And I was also fortunate that this was a period where we could plan and develop a constructive agenda for relationship. It was a period of uh, possibilities. Uh, India-China relations have always been complex and difficult. We have the outstanding boundary question. We have, problems along the line of actual control,
Yes, sir.
which has not been
Resolved so far.
clarified. We have differences on a whole lot of issues. So it's a relationship which is quite complex and problematic. Yet, when I went there, and I recall presenting my credentials to President Xi Jinping, and he said that he looks upon development of India-China relations as a very major uh, priority for himself. And then soon after May 2014, when the new government, led by Prime Minister Narendra Modi, came to office, they reached out to me, and then Foreign Minister, who's again Foreign Minister
Yes,
Wang
sir.
Yi, uh, he told me that he has been asked to go to India as President Xi Jinping's special emissary, and whether we can accommodate the visit. We naturally, I consulted New Delhi, and we said yes, we'll be very happy to accommodate the visit. So he became the first foreign minister uh, to visit India
Yes,
after
sir.
new government came to office. Even during this visit, uh, we conveyed our concerns and expectations in fairly uh, categorical terms, but we're also looking at what can be done. And then President Xi Jinping came to India in September 2014. This was an extraordinary visit because Prime Minister Narendra Modi broke protocol and he went to Ahmedabad to receive President Xi. This was
I see.
a suggestion originally emanating from Chinese side, which we accommodated. Again, it was not easy because while President Xi was in Ahmedabad the first evening itself, uh, uh, we got the message that we had some border standoff ongoing. It has been escalated. So, in fact, Prime Minister had to convey privately a fairly
I see.
clear message to President Xi. What I'm trying to bring out that uh, there were problems, there were difficulties, but we were looking at possibilities. Uh, During President Xi's visit and next year when Prime Minister Modi visited China in May 2015, when President Xi traveled to his hometown, Xi'an, to receive Prime Minister Modi, which was again very unusual, very
Hmm.
extraordinary. Uh, we tried to develop an agenda, what we described at that time as closer developmental partnership, that growth of China could generate opportunities for India and growth of India could likewise generate opportunities for China. We developed, engagement in various areas. For instance, when Prime Minister was in Beijing during that visit, uh, we wanted to organize a yoga event. Uh, you
Yes,
know,
sir. I get
we
that.
had launched International Day of Yoga, and we wanted to do a major event. I approached the Chinese side. They said they'll be very happy to join us, and can we make it a yoga Tai Chi event? Tai Chi is the
Yes, sir.
traditional
It's Chinese
uh,
traditional art. Yes, sir.
martial art. Not only that, they provided the Temple of Heaven, which is an iconic site in Beijing, and Premier Li Keqiang, he joined the event with Prime Minister Modi, and selfie that Prime Minister Modi took of himself and Premier Li Keqiang really went viral with millions of views.
I see.
No, Prime Minister, in fact, incidentally at that time had opened a social media account in China. Uh, so we had problems, including I referred to border issue, whole lot of the other problems. Trade deficit was increasing. Chinese were not very supportive of India on a whole lot of issues like India's membership of UN Security Council
Yes, sir.
or joining nuclear suppliers group or on question of designation of well-known terrorists in the UN list. So managing differences yet uh, ensuring that relations remain on even keel. We were trying to get more investment from China because that time approach was different. Uh, I believe that was, again, a fascinating experience, very challenging, but as I mentioned earlier, our engagement was at that time still, uh, full of possibilities while we're tackling uh, outstanding
Very,
issues and
very much
problems.
paradoxical relationship.
Yeah, so not paradoxical but complex. It
Yeah.
was a very complex relationship.
So, sir, you have been in a room with Xi Jinping. So, what was your experience of meeting him? Let's just say. So, how do you basically portray him as a world leader?
No, Xi Jinping clearly is a very strong leader. Uh, since he became General Secretary of Communist Party of China in late 2012, and then he became President of People's Republic of China in March 2013. He has come to dominate political space in China like no other leader since Mao Zedong. Uh, Xi Jinping thought has become part of uh, uh,
China is
Chinese,
heading towards.
constitution
Yes, sir.
of the party state, an essential element. They talk about, uh, leadership of Communist Party of China, which Xi Jinping had scored. So to some extent, it's become a personality cult also. But he is a dominant personality, no doubt about it. But under his leadership, China has also become more aggressive and assertive. Uh, while China has continued to make major achievements, there is also pushback. from various countries to China's uh, aggressive behavior, including its pursuit of uh, unilaterally defined so-called core interests.
Yes, sir.
For instance, in South China Sea or Taiwan or East China Sea, or even pushing the envelope along India-China borders. They have not been very mindful of uh, sensitivities and concerns of other countries, including India. So it has led to serious complications in China's relations with various neighboring countries, including India, as also with the developed world in particular. The USA and European countries, Japan, Australia. So it has been a mixed bag. Moreover, today China is passing through a period of economic and geopolitical headwinds. Uh, Economic problems because Chinese economy is slowing down, and this is not cyclical that they
Yes,
will
sir.
recover and once again start growing at rapid pace. It's more structural. I'll not go into specifics. Likewise, I refer to pushback to China's aggressive behavior. So that is providing geopolitical headwind. So Xi Jinping's legacy, while undoubtedly important, is somewhat mixed bag at this point of time.
So, sir, what are your fears regarding China, and especially regarding, let's just say, Modi and Xi Jinping? They will be both world leaders at least for another 5 years, if I'm not wrong. So, sir, what do you think is a future relationship of India and China?
You know,
Your
as
expectations
yeah,
and your fears.
as things stand, there is no doubt about the fact that relations between India and China are passing through a very difficult period. Uh, uh, the trigger point for the slide in relationship was Chinese actions in Eastern Ladakh beginning April May 2020, and
Yes,
the
sir.
clash in Galwan Valley on the night of 15-16 June 2020, resulting in
Death of 20
casualties
soldiers.
on both sides. Uh, Also, China's effort to change the status quo at multiple locations along India-China line of actual control, but especially in Eastern Ladakh, uh, which has led to nature of uh, borders changing. Traditionally, we had managed to maintain peace and tranquility in border areas, even though there were occasional, problems. We had put in place a fairly elaborate regime of what we call confidence building measures. I was involved in negotiating many of those agreements. On the whole, they had worked well. But that regime, in a way, has broken down at this point of time because India-China borders have become live with you know heavy deployment on both sides.
Yes, sir.
Chinese moved in their artillery aircraft,
Near the border.
near the border, and we had to do likewise. Uh, so it's a different border we have between India and China. We are trying to bring about disengagement. We have made some progress, but much more work remains to be done. In terms of de-escalation of tensions and de-induction of troops from border areas, not much progress has been made. So this is one major problem. And as External Affairs Minister Dr. Jaishankar says, state of borders will determine state of relations. If borders are abnormal, relations cannot return to normal track. Though Chinese argue that let's delink the two issues, which is not acceptable to us. But this is the trigger point for slide in relations. There are deeper structural difficulties in India-China relations. There is an outstanding boundary question which remains unsolved, with very little interest on part of China to move towards early settlement. Then world views of India and China are increasingly divergent. You look at Indo-Pacific or Quad. We are not on the same page. Uh, China is pursuing strategies and behavior in our immediate periphery in South Asia, in the Indo-Pacific region, which doesn't quite uh, accommodate our sensitivities and interests. Uh, China is seen to be less than supportive of India's aspirations. I referred earlier that how they are not uh, supportive of India's membership,
Yes, sir.
permanent membership UN Security Council, or India joining nuclear suppliers group, and these are just two examples. So we find that somehow the Chinese stance towards rise of India is less than positive. So these are structural problems in relationship which need to be addressed. First task, of course, is to see that border areas become peaceful once again. But then we'll have to start, addressing these issues, including, huge imbalance in trade. Last year, our trade deficit with China was in excess of $100 billion.
So this is exactly what I want to say. Like, why the hell are we dealing with China? Why are we trading with China? So since 2020 Galwan class, our trade, let's just say deficit has increased by 62%. I just don't get this thing.
You have to understand that uh, when it comes to trade, uh, it's driven by private sector. It's based on supply and demand. China provides certain commodities at very competitive
But if the
rates.
borders truly,
So let me just explain. It's not so easy. Let me give you a couple of examples. We are trying to position ourselves as the pharmacy of the world.
yes,
We are a major producer of pharmaceutical products. But we have to depend a lot on China for what is called active pharmaceutical ingredients, APIs,
yes, sir,
because we are not producing
that
in
in India.
sufficient quantity. Uh, we can't, you know, suddenly we can reduce our dependency over a period of time, but we can't break our commercial links with China in that area. Likewise, you have a uh, telecom sector. We are trying to develop that handsets are manufactured. We have made progress. Apple, uh, Foxconn, others, they have set up facilities in India. But even now, 80% of components are imported from China.
Yes,
So this is not something you can change overnight. This will happen over a period of time. I'll give you a third example. We have very ambitious plans for moving towards renewable
so
energy,
renewable energy, right?
solar power, wind power, other areas. Solar power equipment, China has 80 to 90% of market share. Uh, we are trying to develop, capacities within country. We have also, imposed tariffs on importation of solar, you know, uh, panels and modules from China. Tariffs ranging
Yes,
from
sir.
25 to 40%. But a balance has to be maintained because we can't let solar power uh, sector be unduly undermined because that's also a major national priority. I'm just giving you an
Yes,
example
I
that
get your point.
these are, you have to make a trade-off. Uh, it's not something you can, change overnight. There are other commodities where if China is competitive, Indian business finds it,
Yeah,
very attractive to
they
source from
find
China.
China as a
And we
heaven.
can't, we are a WTO,
Yeah,
member country. We can't impose tariffs unilaterally on China. So it's driven by market considerations. What we need to do is to consciously phase down our dependencies on
yeah,
China, especially in sensitive areas, which have a bearing on our
national
national
security.
security environment, and also where we have the wherewithal to create domestic capabilities, through made in Make in India,
Yes, sir.
initiative. So that's happening. We have the PLI scheme,
Yeah, you're
production
absolutely
linked
right, sir, in your
incentives. So
every
this will
point.
happen. I mean, this is something which needs to be done
Gradually.
in a phased manner, but we must have uh, there will be a period of transition, but we must have both a clear vision where we want to reach and a roadmap for reaching there.
I see. I get it. I totally respect your points, and it is way too like absolutely no issues about it. The only thing is our dependence is actually increasing day by day rather than decreasing. So that is the
You
only
know,
underlying concern I
in
see.
some areas it's increasing, but in many areas it's
Yeah,
also decreasing. So there
yeah,
is I think there is awareness uh, within Government of India that we need to reduce dependence, and we are not alone. In
yes, sir.
fact,
Every South Asian
many
country
other
wants to
countries, you
reduce.
look at
Sri Lanka.
USA, look at uh, uh, Western countries,
Yeah,
European countries, look at even uh, Southeast Asian
yeah,
countries, they are mindful of the need not to become excessively dependent
on
on one
China.
source country,
Yes,
diversify. So there is a very major restructuring and diversification of global value chain unfolding at this point of time, where China's centrality will be diluted to an extent. But China is the largest manufacturing country in the world. It's the
yes,
largest trading nation in the world. So its centrality will not change overnight. But I think there is certain trend which we need to monitor closely and take advantage of that by developing India as a major node in global value and supply chain.
I see. So, sir, I want to let's just say go back to your journey in Sri Lanka. So you are the ambassador over there. How were you treated as an ambassador? Let's say even as an ordinary Indian citizen, when you were when you are in the streets of Sri Lanka, nobody knows that you are the ambassador, right? So is there still so much of hatred towards Indians from Sri Lankan?
No, no, far from it. First, in Commonwealth countries, we call our ambassadors High Commissioner.
Yeah,
So yeah, so
that I forgot. Sorry. Yeah, that I forgot.
now in Sri Lanka there is a huge reservoir of goodwill for India. Uh,
There is now.
no, there has always been. There are areas where there are concerns, anxieties about India's behavior, policies, but by and large. It's a relationship which is based on very strong foundations of uh, civilizational connect, linkages between two societies, two economies, geographies, and most importantly, interests. There's no contradiction in
Yes,
vital
sir.
interests of India and Sri Lanka. So foundations are strong. Uh, when I traveled in Sri Lanka, it was very difficult to travel sort of incognito
Yes,
because
sir.
Indian High Commissioner has certain profile there, and
Definitely,
also
sir.
there was aspect of security at that point of
Yes,
time because soon after end of LTT, civil war. But I didn't come across any hostility. In fact, both among Tamils, there are Sri Lankan Tamils and Indian origin
yes,
Tamils
sir.
in
Like
different
there
parts
is
of,
some
yeah.
hatred which is
No,
persisted.
it was not hatred. I didn't come across any hatred among Tamils, for instance. In fact, they appreciated assistance we were providing by way of relief, rehabilitation, reconstruction, resettlement that I referred to earlier. Uh, Then among Sinhalese also, there is a deep civilizational connect with India. Uh, Sinhalese, you'll be surprised. I will not take names, but top leaders of Sri Lanka I was dealing with, all of them will visit Sai Baba
Really?
for getting blessings.
I see.
They will visit Tirupati, and this was uh,
Very normal. Very
very
normal.
normal, very
I see.
normal. I mean, they would like to visit if they're Buddhist, they would like to visit Bodh Gaya also and other Buddhist pilgrimage sites. But uh, visiting Tirupati was equally dear to them.
Yes.
I'm just giving them that. Let's not go by stereotypes. I'll give you one more look. Talking of Sinhalese community, When I was High Commissioner there, then President Mahinda Rajapaksa,
Yeah.
he requested that we should take Kapil Vastu relics to Sri Lanka. Kapil Vastu relics are bone fragments of Lord Buddha, and which are kept in National Museum. And this is the only, I think, confirmed,
Yes, sir.
relics of Lord Buddha. We were not allowing these relics to travel out of India because the organic material they can uh,
Yes, sir.
disintegrate if they're not handled properly. Uh, we had to take Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh's permission uh, to take them to Sri
Yes, sir.
Lanka. Uh, we took the relics by a special aircraft uh, from New Delhi to Colombo. We signed an agreement where relics were given the status of head of state, you know, in terms of
I
protocol and
see.
security. Uh, President Mahinda Rajapaksa was at the airport to receive the relics. And then they traveled in different parts of Sri Lanka, especially to Buddhist Mahaviharas there. You can't imagine no kind of response there was uh, to getting darshan of relics. They used to be miles long
I
queue
see.
forming.
Yes, sir.
I'm just illustrating that these are links between India and Sri Lanka, uh, both majority community and minority communities, which are very strong. And I was in Sri Lanka 3 weeks ago. I
Yes.
traveled to Jaffna, Mannar, Trincomalee, Colombo. So I spent about a week in Sri Lanka. I met with a whole lot of people, including, called on uh, President Ranil Wickremesinghe. There is a great deal of appreciation for what we have done during last couple of years at the time of a huge economic crisis Sri Lanka was facing.
It was left to dogs, seriously.
We stepped in as the first responder. We did that because we are the closest neighbor of Sri Lanka, because of our neighborhood first policy, and this is something which is greatly appreciated. So I didn't come across any undercurrent or hostility. Of course, there are issues, there are
Yes, sir.
problems. We need to do so much more. During recent visit to President of Sri Lanka, we agreed on a vision document, uh, but implementation will be challenging. I have no doubt about it. But I have spent 3 years and 8 months in Sri Lanka, and I remain quite optimistic and positive about prospects of India-Sri Lanka relations.
Sir, I just have a rough question in mind. So I want to know your expert on opinion on this answer. So do you think that the relations between Sri Lanka and India have generally, let's just say, failed over time, owing to India's development, let's say India's partnership with Sri Lanka or India's missions in Sri Lanka, or what do you think, sir? Like earlier they were hostile a bit, you can say so. Like they Sinhalese people were used to discriminate Indian Tamils. So do you think that owing to India's committed partnership with Sri Lanka, they have changed their behavior over time?
There are issues where Sri Lanka has to deal with its internal,
Yes.
problems. You referred to the problem of Indian origin Tamils or plantation
Yes, sir.
Tamils who traveled from India to Sri Lanka in recent centuries, or Sri Lankan Tamils who have been part of Sri Lanka for many centuries. There are problems. As I mentioned earlier, during my tenure as High Commissioner of India to Sri Lanka, we made progress on various issues, but not on the issue of political settlement or reconciliation. So that is still an unfinished agenda.
I see.
Uh, we can only nudge uh, government and society in Sri Lanka to move in the right direction. Sri Lanka is a hugely talented country. In terms of uh, human resource endowments, it's number one in South Asia. They have good natural resources. They are strategically located. Uh, for instance, the Colombo port,
Yes, sir.
65% of business is transshipment linked to India. So we depend a lot on Colombo port. Uh, so they are no in some ways well placed, but they need to get over some of those internal problems where minority communities feel that they're equal partners
I see.
in Sri Lankan society. So this is something they need to do on their own with gentle nudge from us from time to time. Essentially, it's a domestic matter for them.
Definitely, sir. So, sir, I want to know, let's just say, from your eyes, you can tell much better to the audience, how is India perceived with the Chinese people versus the Chinese Communist Party, and how is, let's just say, China perceived by India? Sorry, India perceived by China.
Uh, you know, perceptions of India in China obviously have evolved.
Yeah.
It's not something fixed or static. And since I had the benefit of serving in China or visiting China since 1981, so I've seen uh, evolution
Yes,
of
sir.
uh, Chinese perceptions of India, especially at the popular level. I'm not going to
Yes, sir.
government policy. What I found that one, there was limited knowledge of India. So India is Western heaven, the place from where Buddhism came.
Yes, sir.
So to that extent, there are positive sentiments about India. But India is also seen as the country which was complicit with British colonial masters in, for instance, suppression of Boxer
Yes,
rebellion
sir.
or in opium wars. To that extent, there are also negative perceptions
Right,
about
sir.
India. So there is one, this mix of legacy perceptions. In recent decades, the primary issue has been lack of knowledge and indifference. So India doesn't quite register so much on their radar screen. It's not a very important part of their day-to-day preoccupations. In some areas, for instance, Indian movies, they had done well in earlier period. Avara,
Yes, sir.
everyone recalls Avara Hum, uh, recent Amir Khan movies and some other movies have done
Yes,
very
sir.
well in China. Uh, but primarily it was lack of information or indifference or lack of relevance also, that to what extent India is, because India was until recently not a very major trading partner for them, though now
Yes, sir.
that has changed. I am afraid that in recent years sentiments have turned more negative in China about India. I was
From the Chinese people or from the Chinese
Chinese
Communist?
people also.
I see.
I was going through this major survey, opinion survey conducted by Tsinghua University, which is a premier
Yeah,
university,
Chinese university.
one of the top two universities of China, second one, other one being Peking University. This was done only in May. And finding came as a bit of surprise to me because only 8% of respondents had a favorable or slightly favorable opinion of India, only 8%. In fact, even USA and Japan, which are otherwise not liked so much, did better than India. So India
Really?
India came at the bottom. You had more than 50% of respondents holding negative. Uh,
I see.
no, not I mean, yeah, negative.
You can say so, below
8%
par.
had favorable views,
Yeah.
or slightly favorable view. Nearly more than 50% negative views of India, and 41% indifferent towards India. So I think that in a way sums up
Yeah.
that indifference remains a major component,
Why is it
but
indifference?
then negativity is also increasing. And what worries me that in India also, because of a number of reasons, including what has happened, uh, in Eastern Ladakh, China's aggressive behavior, Galwan clash, sentiments in India about China have also become negative. They have soured.
Yes.
So there is lack of trust of China in India. So this is not a very happy situation,
Like,
where on both sides we are not looking at each other's in a favorable light.
sir, what I don't get is India might be having no sympathy for the party, for the CCP, but they might be having sympathy for the Chinese people who are being ruled by it. But what I don't get
Yeah,
is on the contrary, why is the Chinese people are increasingly, let us say, disliking India, in the Indian people?
you know, on Indian side, there is a degree of admiration for what China has achieved over the last 4 decades,
Yes,
and this is truly what they have done is truly
remarkable.
extraordinary. There's no doubt about it. The way they have, developed economically, world-class infrastructure, that they have put in place. Uh, the fact that more than 600 million people have been pulled
Yes, sir.
out of poverty, all this is very
True.
impressive, no doubt about it. And I believe there is appreciation or recognition of that in India. Uh, but uh, in India, mm, 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 there are other sentiments, about how China is not,
Yes, sir.
well disposed towards us. Their behavior along the border areas. Likewise, in China, as I mentioned earlier, even earlier, indifference was always a problem. Uh, Negative sentiments deriving out of uh, his colonial or quasi-colonial memories were always there. But now there's also this that people feel that India has moved too close to the USA, for instance.
Yes.
India is trying to contain China. I'm not saying that India is doing that. Actually, India is not doing that. But uh, we need to understand it's very difficult to dissect and understand the sentiments at popular level, especially in case of societies like China, which are relatively closed, where access given to outsiders is limited. And that is increasingly the case. In fact, it's becoming less open compared to what it was a few years ago.
I see.
It's becoming more opaque. And in many areas, opinion formation is also based on a certain manipulation by party state.
Yes, sir.
So that also doesn't work to our advantage.
Right, sir. So one last question. How do you portray S. Jaishankar as foreign minister of the country, sir?
No, he has been, and he's an old friend. So
I see.
let me start with full disclosure. He's my batchmate.
I see.
He was my predecessor in Beijing as ambassador. So we have known each other for a very long time.
I see.
Uh, he has been an effective, you know, uh, representative of India, no doubt about it, both earlier in his diplomatic career and since 2019 as Foreign Minister of India.
Okay, sir. So I want to really ask these two questions. So what's the best part of being an ambassador, and also one lesson which this profession taught you?
Best part of being an ambassador or being India's representative abroad, I think to some extent I've answered that already. That the privilege of representing your country,
I
country of
see.
1.4 billion people, articulating its concerns, interests, and aspirations, playing a modest role in seeing that those interests, concerns, and aspirations are advanced. I think in different ways. We have discussed earlier some
Yes,
of
sir.
my experiences. Uh, so that is one aspect I have really enjoyed and which has always given me a great sense of honor. Uh, One lesson diplomacy that I've learned from diplomacy, that it's very important to naturally, our primary job as diplomat uh, is to project and promote national interests of India, my country. But at the same time, it's very important to do so in an enlightened manner. You can't be crass or aggressive in doing that, because that will become counterproductive. It's very important to understand the other side's point of view also, being able to step into his or her shoe
I see.
and see where it pinches. Because unless you understand your interlocutor, your ability to convince him or her is also limited. So this is a two-way process, uh, where you are interpreting your country to the other side, but at the same time you're also interpreting the other side to your domestic audience.
Yes,
So
sir.
you are a channel uh, for two-way communication. Uh, you know,
Uh,
this has to be done with a sense of responsibility, with empathy and understanding. So you should not only know your position, your case, you should have an equally firm grasp of the case or other side.
I see.
As a negotiator, as a diplomat, that's a prerequisite.
Thanks so much, sir.
Not
It
at all.
was really wonderful to have this conversation with you. I'm absolutely humbled, sir. Thank you
Not
so
at
much
all.
for being
It's
on
my
the show.
pleasure.
Honor, sir. Honor.